Welcome, listeners. This is Creative Critical Reflection by a Fireplace sound effect playing on my laptop. I am your host, Evan DeRosso, director and writer, editor, producer, all that stuff behind the short film opening, Bullets Bring the End. Bullets Bring the End. We have some compulsory questions we got to answer here, but first, I'm going to start with my final thoughts on the film, and it's pretty good. Try to pat myself on the back, but I think it's good. I would have liked to reshoot. There were some things that I think we missed, and I will talk about how I would have liked to recover from those later. Ultimately, I would have liked to reshoot, but it was undoable with my actors. Ultimately, though, I think it turned out great. All right, so let's get into question one. How does your product use or challenge conventions, and how does it represent social groups or issues? So this film I consider sort of thriller, romance, horror film. One way I would say it subverts expectations and conventions of the genres is its music choice. I went with something lighter, more fun, as opposed to a dark sound that's common with that genre. It's a cheerier needle drop as opposed to a darker, maybe more instrumental tone, or Nirvana track from the new Batman film. But what's interesting about such a subversion is that the subversion itself is sort of a convention of the genre. You look at things, a film like A Clockwork Orange, where it doesn't exactly fit into the type of film I'm making. It's not exactly a thriller. It's its own thing as well. But that has a scene, a quite gruesome scene, wherein the main character, while committing a horrific act against another person, sings the song Singing in the Rain. So this is nothing new to that genre and to these genres. That subversion is a convention. So it gets murky there. I do think I stuck to some of the conventions, and it's in dark tone and a sort of violent nature, with a hitman being the main character, and an introduction of a horror character to add to the horror elements of the film. I would say one way it might break it is a one-shot film. There's very little editing, where a lot of films might do a bunch of different camera angles cut together, but that's not my personal style. I like normal cuts and to see everything, and I think that angle, just looking at the entire film, adds to that atmosphere. We experimented with other angles and camera movements, starting in front of the guy running and looping around into the car. And while I think it would have been technically interesting, we couldn't because of rain. But it was also just it was a little too showy for the type of film I would like to make. It does subvert in another way, breaks these conventions by it doesn't show any on-screen violence, just a gun shooting and an implied death, and implying that someone is dragging a body out of the way. How it represents social groups. Honestly, I had mostly white actors, only white actors in the film, although my friend playing the demon character was Hispanic. So, yeah, not much else I can say about that. I would have liked maybe more inclusion, but I don't have that many friends. So, there's that. The second question, how does your product engage with audiences, and how would it be distributed as a real media text? This is a film that's meant to be watched and enjoyed, especially, if it was in full form. Here it is on YouTube, so if somebody happens to run across it, they'll consume it as more of a video, but it is cinematic, and I hope people would watch it and treat it with that same regard. Pardon one moment. With the elements I think the film would excel in are just the feelings associated with it, the atmosphere, the vibes of it, and the story. I think that's what would excel in a film like this. I wouldn't consider it a theme-rich film, although I definitely do think in a fuller, more complete version, there would be interesting aspects that one could look at and gain something out of. In its current form, just 2 minutes of a murder and a setup to bigger things, there's nothing there as of now. If it was a real media text, how would it be distributed? It's tough. You could do that as an individual indie film, self-produced. I think if I really put my mind to it, I could definitely get people around. But I also really love that idea, so I don't know if I would want it in such a small, limited way of making it that would come with such a thing. I think it'd be a film that looks better on a more on film. With a good amount of production value behind it, especially a final sequence would take a set being built, so it would be best to not go that route. I think a smaller studio, perhaps A24, they're new and they have a history of putting bets on upcoming directors and filmmakers, looking at people like Ari Aster and the Safdie brothers for their films Hereditary and Good Time, and Robert Eggers with The Witch. They're both, all those directors now are doing great things and coming up in the industry, and they started at A24, who takes a lot of risks, and they're a good studio. They're making big waves in the industry, and I think if a good script were to get to them with this story, then it might be picked up. All right. Next question: how did your production skills develop? Well, as I said earlier, with the wanting the reshoots, we couldn't view what we had on the camera, and we were running out of time. So I would have liked to reshoot. But what's important is to know what you want before going into it. I think a big thing I noticed was I followed the script. So when I went to do the voice line for the film, I did them all myself. And I did a time. I did more of a countdown as opposed to a date. And when I looked back at the script, I saw the date and I remembered how I liked that more than what ended up in there. And it also made a reference to that's the date where the end of the world will end. And I think that specificity would have been appreciated in the final film as to what this guy was counting down. Now, obviously, this countdown is something of like, it's not good, and it's such a long time that it's probably not, say, this guy's, like, how long he has to live. So I think many people would be able to inference that it's the end of the world, but I don't think it's an inference that a good filmmaker would want to bet on their audience in picking up. I learned another thing. I learned editing basics. I used DaVinci Resolve, and I didn't have a lot of footage to cut together and didn't have a lot of effects. But I got to experiment with color grading and certain transitions, adding in the credits, and since I did all the sound effects, I had to put them all together in there. So I got experience with sound mixing as well, and it was a lot of fun. It was definitely interesting. It was a good time, and I liked that. I feel like it came together in that final process, which is interesting. You don't normally think about when you're watching a movie to notice the editing or put much importance on the editing in the film, but when you get to do it, it really adds a lot to it, and I thought that was interesting and really exciting. Another thing I learned is to use the resources you have access to make the film. The biggest example here was I didn't have a microphone to record all the sound effects, and I did not want to use my phone to just talk into those or get whatever I need. I feel like it wouldn't sound as good as if I had a microphone, and I wanted it to be the best it could be. So I asked my teacher if she had a microphone. She said no. She contacted the IT guy at the school, and he did. So I got to use that microphone to record all the sound effects, which was great. It definitely didn't sound as bad as it might have if I just used my phone. And here I am using a microphone I recently bought because this whole process had got me more into filmmaking, and my friends into filmmaking. So we are starting that. I have a short film I just finished a script for, and now I need a storyboard so we can shoot. So my production skills will develop further, but it got me to a point where I want to start making it. The final question: how did you integrate technologies? It's a bit of a lame one to end off with, but oh well, it's the order. I used for editing DaVinci Resolve, which was a free software I found online that had good reviews. So I used it, and it was very, I would say it was pretty intuitive. And if I were to do a tutorial online for it, I feel like I would get the basics pretty quickly. I used a Rode mic for the audio. I hooked it into the phone and went on the voice memo app, and that's how I'm recording this now. And that's how I recorded all the sounds then. And I also have a camera. It is a Panasonic AGAC 130 cam I bought online. It's a great camcorder, and I'm looking to actually upgrade now since I'm getting more into it. I found a better one for cheaper, which is cool. But of course, I don't use it. Good thing about the new one is it has a shoulder pad, whereas this one didn't. So my friend is sitting in the back seat with the camera, was struggling to keep it still and to focus on everything and hold it for that time. So yes, that is my creative critical reflection. I'm glad you listened in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.